Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of That NextGen Planners podcast. As always, you are here with your hosts, me, Amelia Hamilton, your head of community at NextGen Planners, and my two fabulous co-hosts, Taylor Beavis.
Hello.
And Clara Metcalf.
Hi.
I realised I never give you your job descriptions. I just decided to do my own. Do you want to give your job description, or is it a mystery and they have to listen back to your episode to learn more?
Mystery.
I
No,
like
financial
being
planner.
mysterious. I think that's great.
Yeah.
I'm also a financial planner.
They work at other places too, but they've got their whole own podcast dedicated to them. I actually don't have a podcast dedicated to me yet. So I think we should sort that at some point, shouldn't we?
We should do that.
Yeah. Anyway, we're not here to talk about ourselves. We are a little bit here to talk about ourselves today, because our last episode where we took the topic of what to wear, or what not to wear rather, really kind of took off in our community.
Yeah,
And there was
it came at a good time, I think.
a really good time. Like, people had a lot of opinions over what we should do and not do, and so I thought we're going to make this a little bit more of a regular occurrence, where it's us discussing something that we feel passionate about or strongly about, and maybe you agree, maybe you disagree, who knows. The topic this week is looking at burnout, work-life balance, how to manage all of those things. And I think as younger people in the industry, we perhaps have different experiences, different expectations, different understandings of what that means, which I'm sure we'll go into. But before we kind of dive into it in any sort of depth, Claire, you had some really interesting statistics that I don't think I would have been able to guess if you had asked me, what number do you think this is? So do you want to go ahead and kind of share some of your findings on this topic first?
Yeah, so it was just from an article in the FT Advisor saying that some research that Medius did found that 75% of finance professionals would not recommend a job in the sector to Gen Z. And additionally,
Yeah.
52% said that they've experienced high levels of burnout and poor work-life balance. And 36% said that a career in finance offers less security and stability than in previous years.
Crikey. Well, that's us done.
Yeah, I know, right. Well, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because that's so contrasting to the message that's put out there. And we want to put out there, it's a great profession to be a part of. We want as many new people to be encouraged to join the sector, but clearly there's some areas that need addressing to make that the case. I mean, over half, I'm not hugely over half, but still over half of financial planners experiencing burnout. That's, I mean, it doesn't sound ideal.
No, I mean, I think as well, it must be, I can't speak from this angle, but Clara, maybe like you have a view on this in terms of you've got employed planners, advisors. It must be really hard to sort of, if they're doing a 9 to 5 on an employed permanent basis and they are experiencing burnout, to then still have to turn up, perform, deliver, whereas me, self-employed, if I got burnout, fortunately can do something a little different on that day or take some time. It's a bit easier, I think, for me, whereas it must be really hard in an employed role. I mean, how does that, from your experience, have you seen how that's managed or supported by employers?
Yeah, so I mean, being completely transparent, I've gone through multiple burnouts in my career. I think that it's the way that I am is kind of maybe slightly predisposed to stress, and I'm not the average employee. I'm neurodiverse, so I don't cope with stress in the same way. And I'm also a bit of a yes person. And I think that's obviously got me into my burnout states on a couple of occasions. And, some employers are really supportive. I'm very blessed to have an employer at the moment who is really supportive.
Good.
However, I have had employers in the past where they don't get it. They don't understand stress, and culturally it's been a bit of a taboo to kind of accept that your staff have stress, and it's toxic masculinity is kind of where that's coming from. And sometimes
I think a lot of the time it's, well, I wouldn't feel like that if I had this situation, but that's not really the point, is it? It's going, this is what this person is experiencing, and we all have areas that we struggle with more than other people, and if you look at your staff, or you look at the people you're working with, and don't really listen to what they need and what would help them, then inevitably you're going to get anxious, you're going to get stressed, you're going to not be able to cope in your role in the same way.
It's funny, really, isn't it? Because as a manager, if you're looking at trying to run a really good team, you want to play to everybody's strengths and weaknesses. And if one team member is struggling for for any reason, it doesn't make business sense to let them drown. You need to hold them up, because otherwise your business will suffer. So I think I have, like I said, I've worked in environments where it has been quite old school, and it's been a bit of a boys' club, and we don't talk about our feelings. What's stress? Stress doesn't exist. I thrive under stress. And it's been like a bit shameful to experience, depression, anxiety, and you should just brush it under the carpet and get on with it. So I think it's something that it's definitely a workplace culture. But if you are a manager, you need to appreciate that actually having a culture like that is harmful to your business in the long run. Unfortunately, I think that the industry is changing, and that kind of culture is hopefully going. There still are companies out there where that is a problem.
Do you think, Clara, that it's more of an issue in terms of the word burnout being seen as a shameful thing to admit, in terms of, is it that, I guess we could say, well, what is burnout? What we saying burnout is, I guess there are different versions of what that is to somebody. Is somebody exhausted and just knackered because of X, Y, and Z professionally that they've been up to and that they've been doing? Is it sometimes linked to depression? So I guess it must be different for everybody. And is that what employers struggle to grapple with, in terms of what that means, and they don't want to say to someone, you're burnt out, we need to do this this and that? Can they approach it differently, do you think? Or
I think it's a good question, isn't it? Because what does burnout mean?
Yeah, it's really hard, isn't it?
Everybody individually will have a different view of what burnout means. Because I mean, the last month for me, I would say mentally I have felt burnt out, but I'm actually quite happy at the moment. I'm not depressed. I've just overdone it, and probably a little bit overstimulated by too much going on. So I have burnt out, but I'm okay. Whereas there have been times where I've burnt out and I am really severely, not okay. I'm quite depressed. And there's very, very different. I think an employer needs to kind of understand maybe what that burnout looks like for that individual and what that individual needs at that point in time, because it's never one size fits all, is it? No.
Do you think, Amelia, then, a question for you, do you think it's too late, based on what we're talking about from an outsider's point of view, do you think it's too late by the time it's got to that point where we're saying it's burnout?
It's exactly what I was about to say. I was about to say, you have to preempt it. You have to have things in place. And clearly it feels like you're where you're at the moment with work, and perhaps the reason why you still feel in a good place is because it hasn't got to the worst possible place. It's like, okay, well, let's change some things now, and let's make sure that we've got things in place that you feel happy with, or how can we take something off of your plate? And then, when you're like, oh, I'm actually great, I'm on top of stuff, let me take something else off of someone else's plate. And if you're always there going, how can I be of use, give and take, then you create a unit that's working really well together. And if you can only give 40%, if you're giving 100% of that 40%, then you're giving 100%. If someone else has got capacity of 90, they'll go, I'll cover your 50%. 60%. God, that was terrible math. No.
They say that in relationships, don't they? I've listened to things on Instagram before where somebody said, if you're in a relationship with somebody and you're going through a rough patch or something like that, you say to them, I've got 20% energy today. What have you got? And they go, I've got 40. So I'll pick up a little bit of the slack, because although I'm still running low, I appreciate you're lower. And it's exactly the same in a team. It's a relationship. It's I guess a thriving organism. You have to all work together.
It's an ecosystem, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I guess that's on the one side of things, how it can work. I guess coming over to you, it's lonelier. You don't have that. Sure. There's nobody who's going to come to you and say, what can I take off your plate? How can I help you? What is it like for you when things get too much, and what can you do? As a lot of people out there are single sole trader businesses. What
I'd say in a weird sort of way, it's so they're completely different different kettles of fish, but it's almost like you have, because just because you're on your own, it doesn't mean that you haven't got somebody watching over you, making sure you're doing what you're doing, is achieving what you should be doing, because that person is you. You're your own worst critic. So the days you want to just do nothing because you're burnt out, the other bit of your brain saying you haven't done the website that you needed to sort out, you haven't done this, you haven't done that. So it actually never stops. It's like having a manager with you all day long, and then at night when you're trying to relax because you didn't do what you needed to do during the day. So I think it's just as challenging the other side. I don't think you can say one's worse than the other, but I think a lot of people think that because you're self-employed that burnout must not happen because you can just go for a walk in the park. But when you do that, your other boss, aka you too, is saying what you haven't done, and it's just this constant thing.
Do you find you get kind of like guilt?
Yes.
If you try to give yourself maybe well-being time to kind of, how do you manage that?
Personally, for me, I have to be really strict in terms of identifying the things that reduce my stress. I think is a strong word for me in terms of how I feel about it. But let's just say to reduce my stress, I like to exercise on a Thursday evening. That's just one example. And I have to make time for it and make sure it's almost like a company rule that my boss has told me, and the boss is me. And it just seems crazy that I could do that on a Thursday, but everything else comes before me in the business in terms of my clients, my deliverables, X, Y, and Z. And the last person I think about is me in terms of personally, whereas I need to make time to do that. So what I do, to answer your question, is I schedule every Thursday evening, and I have to have a real good reason. It's a bit like going to your boss with a real reason as to why you can't do something. I have to give myself a very good reason why I don't go to Body Pump on a Thursday. Why are you not? And if you've got to do something, well, why can't that wait until Body Pump is done? Because that is the thing that reduces my burnout. So for me, I don't think it's one swooping thing. It's like go on a holiday for 3 days because you're burnt out. It's like little reductions every week just to keep it simmering away so that it doesn't boil over, which is the burnout to me.
I think another thing to take into account that I feel is hidden in burnout is working from home, because there's no separation. And I think this is something that after the pandemic, and especially with Gen Z, having flexibility and working from home is almost an expectation now, that you wouldn't go for a job unless there was some level of flexibility, unless you're like a doctor or something where you have to be there physically. So inevitably, people are going to be working from home. To try and manage that and to try and have separation from your work, to try and create a space that is in your home but then is your work, but might even be in your bedroom for some people, there isn't that anything. How can either you as an individual or like a company be aware of helping an employee when they're not physically there to be able to witness anything and don't have a huge amount of control over the workspace? I think that's something that's a really tricky question. I don't know how you found it because obviously you're remote, you work from home, and you're how is it then the onus on you to reach out to an employee?
It's difficult because I go into the office on a Monday and I really enjoy that break, like you said, that commute home, because I'll stick on a podcast and it's like that lovely headspace. And I know looking back when I wasn't in a good place with a previous employer, that journey home was vital for me to just let it go for the day. The problem I had was that I came home and I was living with my parents at the time, and I would then sort of fire back up all of the anxiety because they'd ask me about my day. And sometimes it's really hard, even if you do have a firebreaker, to still know when to leave something be for your own sake. And I think whether you're working in office or working from home and stopping and having an activity, whether that's like Taylor was saying, going to a class or going for a run, even if you have the firebreaker, it's really, really hard when you're suffering with work stress to like leave work at work mentally, particularly in financial services industry. especially if you look after clients and you're client facing, you're worrying about them a lot. And
Yeah.
some people are really good at managing that and some people are not. So reaching out to colleagues and talking to them can really help you, because you've almost got like an accountability buddy. But I mean, for you, Taylor, how do you do that?
So a couple of things that have been popping in my mind as you were just talking, just kind of rewinding a little bit to your point about sort of managing it in the workplace. You'll know that I snooze all WhatsApp notifications on my phone. So if you try to get hold of me, you know that WhatsApp is not going to come through, right? And it's because the norm now in a lot of companies is WhatsApp groups, like for different things. And they can really cause burnout, because you're seeing that in your personal life. It's all in with all your personal conversations, and it can be really unhealthy. So one of the measures I've taken in the last year, and it has been amazing, is mute WhatsApp. And if it's urgent, I'll go on there. And if you really need me, you just phone me, or, text me. But because everything goes on WhatsApp groups, and catch up in my own time. So, because I found that they are a source of anxiety. I would see things like piling up and the number would get bigger on the group. Like, I have 25 unread things, and you're thinking, I need to catch up. And it's not okay I don't think, for an employer to expect people to be engaging with and reviewing what are ultimately work conversations in their own time. So I think that's one thing. But in terms of the focus element, what I use to focus, which when I've told my friends and family, they think it's nuts. There's something called FocusMate, which is like an online platform. Have you ever used it? Yeah.
Not that specific one.
There's Yeah. So I schedule a call in my calendar, and somebody else across the globe is also needing to do an hour of work at that time. And we log on and we hold each other accountable. I have no idea who they are, and at the end of the hour they go, and I never see them ever again.
Oh, like a body doubling kind of thing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good.
It's online. And so I do about 3 sessions a week of that, and you can have it 50 or 75 minutes. That's based on science as to the time you should work, and the max focus. And that's a game changer.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, do you know what? I have tried that actually, funnily enough, with some friends in the industry. Shout out to Bex Wealthy. But also Phoebe, who I work with, sometimes when I'm really overwhelmed and I've got deadlines and I'm really struggling to focus, one of the ways that she helps me is she'll jump on Teams and we'll just sit and coexist and do our work together, which has been really helpful, because you're also building that kind of I guess that colleague relationship as well. It's quite nice to have that human contact, but that's such a fantastic idea if you're self-employed, because you don't have a Phoebe.
Yeah, you don't have somebody else to, you could find other people, but if it's in other people in your industry, like you and I, that's great, but we'll probably sit chatting about X, Y, and Z.
Oh my God, this client's just said this.
Yeah. Or you'll make a lovely hot chocolate like you sometimes do for me.
Yes.
But yes, it's just somebody that's completely independent, and they're not going to ask me any questions, but they're just going to make sure that I'm there for 50 minutes.
Perfect. Well, I think I'm going to pause the conversation there just for a little break, and we will be right back in just a moment. Hello, everyone. I hope you are enjoying this current episode of That NextGen Planners podcast. In this short break, I just wanted to take the opportunity to remind you of a few things that we've got going on at NextGen Planners. Firstly, we have our brilliant Elements 2025 conference tickets now available. They sell out pretty fast, so you can go online, you can find out loads more information about our fantastic annual conference that happens every year. It's always so much fun, so we'd love to have you there, so make sure you secure your place now. And also, I'd like to mention business membership, which is a really exciting new section of our community that we've got for businesses who want to take their business to the next level. So do make sure you check out that on the website, along with loads of other things about our brilliant community. But that's it for me for now. I'll pass you probably back over to myself. Over to you, Amelia. Welcome back to this episode of That NextGen Planners podcast, where we are talking about burnout. And just before the break, Taylor raised a really, really interesting solution to some of the difficult things that we face working from home, and not having, perhaps a lot of you, not having people around to hold you accountable, is having someone virtually to hold you accountable. This is something that we could do more, I'd be interested to see, maybe this week, as this podcast drops, I'll schedule something in the community. I could host an empty call and just have anybody who wants to join. and say, this is what I'm going to achieve in the next hour, and we will co-work together and hold people accountable. What do you think that would be something you would?
I think it can't hurt to try, can it?
Yeah.
I mean, if it works, it works. Brilliant.
Yeah, and it will totally work. It's mind blowing. When I first did it, I thought this is really weird, like because I could just work for an hour here without anyone over there on the screen. But it's transformational because you know that this slot is running. You're there for a purpose. You've got to get stuff done. And if you put the goals down as what you want to achieve at the beginning, you don't want that call to end and you haven't done it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really
it's funny. It feels like you feel responsible to that person despite the fact that you gave that person what you were going to do.
So I use it a lot for meeting notes. So there's a lot of AI and stuff and it's getting better. But, you know, historically writing up my notes, not so much meeting notes, but just after a client meeting, getting everything ready, I'd always put that off and then I'd give it a week and then I've forgotten little bits of what they said.
Yes.
So I now, after a session, I book one of these focus calls and I have to come off that call having written everything up.
That's a really good idea.
Because that's what I struggle with. That's the one thing I struggle with, and that's what I use it to target that.
So we use an AI note transcribing tool for our meetings at the moment, and a lot of them, they're still quite young. They're learning, they're growing, the AI is being taught, and there are little fixes that need to be made. But I have dyslexia and ADHD, so I really, really struggle with the format sometimes of how these notes come out because there's a lot of repetition or you've got to go through and edit it. And I have proper issue with perfectionism. So I like my notes to be nice. And I remember I had one incident which sort of didn't help with the burnout that I was experiencing at the time, where the notes felt so, I guess the word's onerous. It really felt like quite a challenge to complete these, and I just couldn't get motivated to do it because I was getting overwhelmed by it, and I just left them and I kicked it down the road. And a couple of weeks later, go back into the notes, and it was literally having my colleague on the call with me, and we sort of set each other. We made it silly because it was the only way I could get through it by this point, because I'd turned this tiny little task into a mountain because I'd kicked it down the road so far. Yeah. And I mean, it was truth or dare, essentially. It was, if I didn't finish this section of my notes in the next 15 minutes, I had to do a plank. It was great fun.
and it's amazing that some people are not like this. So the people I work with in terms of my business, one of them in particular, no need to name her, she is a very, very methodical worker, right? So I am envious of her ability to start the day. And I'd explain it like this. She completes the day as like an alphabet. So she'll do A, then she'll do B and C, and she goes just through as far as she gets. My day is A, Z, E, F. I'm all over the place. And you can guarantee that in my alphabet, I'm dropping all the letters I don't want to touch today.
Yeah.
Like C and F and I, they're off because I don't want to do them. And they build up and then it's burnout. So I target those little letters with my sessions. Also, Clara, we haven't said about nature, right? You and I go sometimes on a dog walk in nature, and I saw some stats. I can't quote them, but it's something
I would come to, but I live far away. That's like, I'm not going on a dog walk with you. I go on my own separate dog walks. And if I live around the corner too, I would also be invited. Just so we're aware. Don't feel sorry for me. I'm not left out. I'm just not close.
We would love to have you on one.
Thank you.
It's like there was some stat like 15 minutes a day in nature has some like effect on your brain.
Yes.
For me, walking, like if we go around the woods with the dogs for like 10 minutes, it's so clearing of the mind. And I think that's one really easy thing that we could do to just reduce some stress on us, because it allows you just that pause to like think about what you've just finished working on. What do you think?
Yeah, and it's that because it's not on you. Like if you said, Taylor, leave the house at 12 today and go walk the dog, you might be like, oh, it's 12:30, I've got to just finish this email. Then it gets like 2 and you go, oh, I'll just do an evening walk. Yeah. But if you say, actually, I've agreed with this person to go for a walk at this time, you kind of feel like you are obligated to. Like I do that with the gym, because I'm really bad at going to the gym, so I like to have a gym buddy because I kind of feel like I'm doing it for them, even though I know I'm doing it for myself.
But I also think, because I feel the same way, but I don't necessarily have somebody to go with all the time. And for me, it's really important to leave the house straight away, like in the morning, get up, get out with the dog, and because otherwise you go, well, let me have some breakfast. Okay, well, I'll do a bit of this. And suddenly it's 3 p.m. and you're like, oh, well, I can't really leave now, but I haven't left the house yet, and it's about to get dark, and now I haven't seen sunlight all day. What I will try and do is It's true though, isn't it? I voice note people. So on that morning walk, that in my head, there's some level of accountability. And then each day can be somebody different. And I'm like, well, that's an opportunity that I'm not going to have for the rest of the day for like a minute that I can just voice. I mean, who am I kidding? My voice notes are not a minute long. But there's ways you can do it if you don't have somebody to go with you, to hold yourself accountable and have someone relying on you in some capacity as well.
Yeah.
And do you think on the burnout thing, like some of us have an issue with, I know I certainly have this, in terms of like incorrectly categorizing our time. So what I mean by that is when you look at, for example, let's just take today, we've had some travel time to get here, right? But I would incorrectly categorize that travel time as not work, and therefore I haven't done the work I needed to do with emails. Well, no, that is part of my job too.
Yeah.
So I have been working. So allowing yourself time to appreciate that you are doing what you're supposed to be doing. Yeah. So another example I use quite frequently for myself is clients will want a 6 p.m. meeting. Okay, so I need to make sure I start a bit later, because otherwise I have a very, very long day. And I'm, if I'm going to work normal hours, take time back, basically, is what I'm saying. Take time back when you should have it back.
And I think that they're, from previous generations who might be listening to us might be like, no, work a longer day. You pay your dues. You if they want a meeting at 6, then you just work longer and you hustle and da-da-da. And I think it's that kind of attitude that leads one to that 52% statistic. Another attitude where they wouldn't recommend it to Gen Z because they wouldn't fit in with that kind of culture. And so I would encourage people who perhaps would have an opinion that's like, well, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and do what I did and like work hard and hustle and you'll get there, to stop and like actually think about how useful that attitude is.
Well, you think where the financial services industry started versus where it is right now, they are very different worlds. I mean, I remember my first boss in the industry saying, oh, do you know what my day consisted of 20-something years ago? I'd come in, I'd do a bit of paperwork, I'd call up a provider and they'd fill in all the forms because we never did any of that. And, I would get my commission, don't say that word, and then I go to the pub. And that was the rest of the day. I'd spend the rest of the day in the pub. And then, the next day was the same. I'd sell a product. And I know I'm kind of maybe not romanticizing it because, it does sound pretty good. But that's an extreme end of it. But the financial services industry has come a really, really long way. And they have to appreciate that actually the amount of responsibility that the financial planning firms now have versus what they did back then is very, very different. Providers have put a lot onto firms, the filling in the paperwork, it's on firms to help. We are literally responsible for everything because, call centers, you can barely get hold of a provider or you're on phone for hours and it's such a waste of time and everything is on us and it's our responsibility.
I think though, from your stats, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was a broad stat, wasn't it, about the whole financial services industry. And what's really interesting is I would argue that us as planners and financial advice firms probably have the best balance of this in the financial services industry, because we are telling our clients to live a good life and we're seeing this day to day. So I think you compare us to the investment banking world where I can't remember the exact figure, but literally within the last few weeks, wasn't it approved that a certain investment bank had said their staff can't work 100 hours a week, they're capped at 80. I mean, who's working 80? So I think within that stat is a lot of bad stuff that thankfully for our industry, I think we're a little bit more aware.
So I think that was actually about financial advice, financial planning.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, because that was FT Advisor. So that is probably because the reason I came into this industry, because I remember thinking, I met a guy who was a small independent. I went in and I just asked what financial planning was. And he said it was brilliant. We spend our day talking to clients. It's really flexible. And like he was sort of selling that whole, it works around my life. And I guess that's why a lot of people kind of think this is a really good career to get into because why can't I make something like this work around my life? If my clients want to see me at 6 p.m. because that's when they're free, that might be when I'm free and I can deal with my kids in the day. And it sounds really great, but in practice, not every firm is comfortable with that. And not every firm is comfortable with that for good reason. For example, safeguarding you. I know at work,